Brief history of Tibetan Esoteric Buddhism, the secret to becoming a Buddha in one lifetime. Welcome back everyone to Mind Podcast. Is it true that Tibetan Esoteric Buddhism can lead to becoming a Buddha in just one lifetime? Or is it a form of heresy? This video seeks to present and explore a general overview of Tibetan Esoteric Buddhism. This broad and introductory understanding is essential for those seeking to learn the teachings and practices of Tibetan Esoteric Buddhism, providing a reference to guide them on their path toward the truth of the Buddhas. Each sentient being is born into human life, unique attributes and capabilities, so everyone must choose the practice method that suits them. In Tibetan Esoteric Buddhism alone, there are numerous distinct schools, each with thousands of different practices. It is impossible to study them all within a single lifetime. Therefore, one must select and dedicate themselves to the path that is most appropriate for their spiritual journey. The history of Buddhism in the world, through the turning of the Dharma wheel. To understand Buddhism and its role in the path to enlightenment, let us explore the origins and history of Indian Buddhism. We know that Shakyamuni Buddha was born into the human world with the noble vow to help sentient beings solve the problem of life and death. At that time, India was under a monarchical system. In terms of material life, the people lived in hardship within a society based on unjust and oppressive caste divisions, which included the following main classes. Brahmins, priests responsible for religious rituals and worship, who claimed the right to be revered and led lives of privilege and luxury. Kshatriyas, the royal and noble class, holding political power and authority over the people. Vaishyas, merchants and landowners. Shudras, the servant class, destined to spend their lives in servitude to the higher caste. Additionally, there was an outcast group, referred to as untouchables, who did not belong to any caste. They were considered even lower than animals, shunned by society, and forced to live lives of extreme suffering and humiliation. In terms of spirituality, Indian society at that time was also living in a state of turmoil. Religious movements and philosophical systems were in utter disarray. Various forms of belief and doctrines emerged, from worshipping worldly gods and deities like Brahma, fire gods, river gods, mountain gods, as well as practices like asceticism or the worship of animals. There were philosophies of all kinds, from the concrete to the abstract, developing theories about time and space, advocating monism, dualism, pluralism. Hundreds of different sects constantly engaged in debates, attacking and criticizing each other. Scholars of that era all considered themselves the most skilled in reasoning and debate. Meanwhile, the common people were suffering under the oppressive rule of unjust social classes, and the theories of these scholars did nothing to alleviate the hardship of the impoverished. The entire society was in chaos, both materially and spiritually, under the influence of these disruptive heretical teachings. In such a state, Shakyamuni Buddha was born and revealed the true path, guiding sentient beings toward successful spiritual cultivation. He practiced saha work and beneficial conduct by embarking on a journey of self-discovery and experimentation with the correct path. Starting from the noble status of a prince, he renounced his family, wealth, and personal ties, and left to pursue the life of a renunciate. He practiced asceticism for years, only to realize that it was not the way to achieve full enlightenment. Thereafter, he devoted himself to deep meditation under the Bodhi tree, developing prajna wisdom. During the 7th week, on the 49th day, just before dawn, he attained complete and perfect enlightenment. After attaining supreme prajna wisdom and full enlightenment, he continued to meditate by the Niranjana river. The deity Brahma Sahampati appeared to praise the Buddha, recognizing that he had achieved the Samyak Sambodhi, perfect and complete enlightenment. The Buddha meditated and contemplated sentient beings who were still mired in desire and worldly pleasures. He reflected that this profound and perfect enlightenment was truly deep, mysterious, and difficult to grasp. It was tranquil, sublime, and beyond the realm of reasoning. Only those with virtuous wisdom could truly understand it. The omniscient wisdom he attained was indescribable and beyond the scope of conceptual thought, making it extremely difficult to teach to sentient beings still immersed in worldly desires. Among the heretical doctrines, the concepts of karmic law and dependent origination, as well as emptiness, are very difficult to comprehend. Similarly, nirvana, which signifies the cessation of all causes, conditions, karmic retribution, and the extinguishing of all desires, leading to ultimate tranquility and bliss, is also challenging to grasp. If the Tathagata were to teach these doctrines, people would surely not understand them, making such efforts in vain. The Buddha further contemplated, it was extremely difficult for the Tathagata to attain this supreme Bodhi wisdom. Yet, people's minds are still steeped in desire and anger, making it hard for them to comprehend. Those who are clouded by desire are like travelers lost in the darkness or enshrouded by thick black clouds, unable to perceive this profound and all-encompassing truth. At that moment, the deity Brahma Sahampati, fearing that the Buddha would not spread the Dharma, worried that the world would be deprived of the opportunity to hear the teachings and would be led to ruin. He thus respectfully requested the Buddha 3 times to turn the Dharma wheel. Thanks to this, the world-honored one accepted, using skillful means to guide sentient beings, giving those who wished to hear the supreme Dharma the opportunity to do so. Immediately, the heavenly beings rejoiced and praised the Buddha for his compassion in remaining in the world to turn the Dharma wheel. Through skillful means, he taught and guided sentient beings who were drowning in the suffering of samsara. As promised, the Buddha remained in the world for 49 years, manifesting in all 3 realms and propagating the supreme teachings. The world-honored one turned the Dharma wheel 3 times in our Saha world, knowing that sentient beings possess different capacity, some bright, some dull, not all equal. Therefore, he could only educate them through skillful means, guiding them step by step, from easy to difficult, rather than diving directly into the core truths. The world-honored one spread the Dharma for 49 years for the benefit of sentient being. According to Theravada Buddhism, he remained in the world for 45 years, sometimes teaching about the self and sometimes about non-self. Ultimately, these teachings were just skillful means, like giving medicine according to the illness, tailored to the capacities and stages of sentient beings' spiritual development. From the perspective of exoteric teachings, this is how it was. However, the viewpoint of esoteric teachings differs slightly, which will be discussed in later sections. The Buddha turned the Dharma wheel 3 times, gradually guiding sentient beings. During the first 2 turnings, the world-honored one taught provisional and incomplete doctrines as skillful means to match the minds of sentient beings. In the 3rd turning, the Buddha taught the definitive doctrine, the supreme teachings of ultimate truth. These core teachings include prajna wisdom, the emptiness of all things, the middle way, 3 natures, and the 3 non-natures. During the first turning of the Dharma wheel, the Buddha taught the foundational doctrines of Hinayana through the 4 noble truths and the 12 links of dependent origination. This period laid the groundwork for what would later become the Hinayana schools, also known as Theravada or the Sarvastivada tradition. The primary scriptures from this period include the 4 agamas and the Dirgha Agama, long discourses. During the second turning of the Dharma wheel, the Buddha taught prajna, wisdom, emptiness, and the 2 aspects of non-self. These teachings prepared the way for the Mahayana, leading to the development of core Mahayana doctrines, including the emptiness of all phenomena. The scriptures from this period include the Prajnaparamita Sutras, such as the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, the Astasahasrika Prajnaparamita Sutra, Perfection of Wisdom in 8,000 verses, and the Diamond Sutra. During the 3rd turning of the Dharma wheel, the Buddha taught the middle way, which belongs to the Mahayana and later Mahayana periods. The key scriptures from this time include the Sandinirmokana Sutra, Flower Garland Sutra, Avadamsaka Sutra, the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, and the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. During the Buddha's lifetime, there was no distinction between Theravada and Mahayana. At that time, all were simply the teachings of the Buddha, guiding the Sangha from the first to the last discourse. Before the Buddha entered parinirvana, we can look back at the entire body of teachings he left for. By combining and synthesizing the methods he taught in a systematic order, we can classify them into 2 categories: provisional teachings, expedient means, and ultimate teaching. These also include the original gate and the traced gate. helping us clearly see the steps that Shakyamuni Buddha took to guide us, holding our hands and leading us gradually on the path from easier practices to more difficult ones, till we are ready to step onto the supreme path of Buddhahood. Ultimately, as his disciples, we must all strive towards this goal. The world-honored one taught us the process of spiritual cultivation using the analogy of a musician tuning a stringed instrument. If the strings are too tight, they will snap. But if they are too loose, the instrument will not produce sound. In the same way, practitioners must choose their methods of practice according to their abilities. The Buddha began by teaching the Four Noble Truths, impermanence, karmic law, and the 12 links of dependent origination. Then, he moved on to meditation practices that involve analyzing the mind, eliminating false views and ignorance, and transcending the ego. After this, practitioners were guided into the practice of non-duality, leading to deep meditation, realization of emptiness, and attainment of the Arhat fruit, where all desires are extinguished, and the practitioner resides in a state of serene tranquility. However, one must not become attached to this tranquil state of nirvana, but instead re-enter the world to liberate all sentient beings. This is the Bodhisattva's path, characterized by self-enlightenment, the enlightenment of others, and the perfection of wisdom. Each stage of practice is a level of realization connected to a specific meditation focus, leading to the next stage of progress. Thus, the provisional methods create temporary goals and temporary achievements, such as the 4 stages and the 4 noble fruits. These stages begin with mindfulness meditation on the 4 foundations to eliminate the 4 inverted views, gradually mastering the 4 noble truths. The provisional path for Shravakas, disciples, and Prayeka Buddhas, solitary Buddhas, was established to help sentient beings progress steadily on the long path without becoming discouraged. Each realization of a specific focus should not lead to complacency or the belief that it is sufficient. Instead, it builds a foundation and generates joy in the heart, encouraging further practice in subsequent methods until one reaches the supreme method and ultimately attains Buddhahood. This was the very path the Buddha himself followed, progressing through various stages until he achieved Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, unsurpassed, complete, and perfect enlightenment. Considering this historical process, we can conclude that all the teachings mentioned above are part of the public or exoteric teachings, also known as Hiangao. The teachings of wisdom, to be contrasted with the esoteric teachings, Mutgao. These exoteric teachings were openly taught and transmitted by the Buddha, Shakyamuni, to his disciples. In Tibetan Buddhism, these exoteric teachings are also referred to as the vehicle of the sutras. At the same time, there were also secret oral teachings passed down privately, according to the capacities and readiness of individual disciples. The exoteric teachings complement and supplement the secret oral teachings, allowing each disciple to fully develop their potential and directly advance on the path. When we reflect on the entire process of the Buddha's 49 years of teaching, we gain the wisdom to synthesize and realize that all these teachings are merely different methods to be practiced, depending on the stages of one's spiritual progress and mental capacity. Ultimately, all paths converge to a single goal: cutting off desire, realizing the emptiness of self, and practicing the Bodhisattva path. After the Buddha's parinirvana, passing into final nirvana, his entire body of teachings was recorded during 4 great councils. The exoteric teachings were compiled into the Tripitaka, the 3 collections of scriptures, which includes the sutras, the Vinaya, discipline, and the Abhidharma, higher teachings. The esoteric teachings, meanwhile, were gathered in Tibet into 2 collections known as the Tantras, referred to as Jur and Kanyur in Tibetan, and Tanjur and Kongyur in Chinese. New practitioners often have basic questions when starting their spiritual journey, particularly about choosing the right school of practice for themselves. One of the most common questions often encountered is, what is the difference between the main Buddhist schools, including 1. Zen Buddhism, 2. Pure Land Buddhism, and 3. Esoteric Buddhism, or Vajrayana? The briefest answer is that the difference lies in the method of practice. The goal of enlightenment is the same for all, but the means to achieve it, or the paths leading to the common goal of enlightenment, differ. All these schools use meditation as a tool, but the way meditation is applied to achieve enlightenment varies as follows. Zen Buddhism is based on the realization of emptiness. The most representative saying of Zen is, "The nature of all things is inherently empty." Thus, Zen practitioners use meditation to enter deep states of concentration through practices like the 4 foundations of mindfulness, directly realizing emptiness, breaking the attachment to the self, and achieving the peaceful state of nirvana. The principle is as follows. All phenomena are illusions. All illusory phenomena are empty. Emptiness is bliss. Bliss is the mandala of all Buddhas. The Lankavatara Sutra also reveals, the world is free from birth and death, like flowers in the sky. There is neither being nor non-being, so one should awaken great compassion. All phenomena are like illusions beyond the grasp of the mind. There is neither being nor non-being, so one should awaken great compassion. The world is like a dream, free from extremes of permanence or annihilation. There is neither being nor non-being, so one should awaken great compassion. Pure Land Buddhism also uses meditation as a foundation, focusing on reciting the name of Amitabha Buddha as taught in the Amitabha Sutra to achieve single-mindedness and be reborn in the Pure Land. Esoteric Buddhism, Vajrayana, is based on the practice of deity yoga. Practitioners visualize themselves day and night as transforming into their chosen Buddha or deity, immediately identifying with the enlightened being. This practice is referred to as becoming a Buddha in one lifetime. So, what is Esoteric Buddhism? Esoteric Buddhism refers to the secret teachings of the Buddha, conveyed in mystical language and intended for those who have practiced for many years. For seasoned practitioners, Esoteric Buddhism may be familiar, but for those just beginning to explore it, the term is likely new and intriguing. Esoteric Buddhism means the secret teachings. Practices meant to be revealed only to those who are ready to receive them. Esoteric Buddhism is a Sino-Vietnamese term commonly used to describe a practice that originates from a combination of Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism. In the simplest understanding, secret, referring to the hidden teachings of a particular sect. These secrets, or esoteric teachings, are transmitted through sacred mantras, hand gestures, mudras, and incantations used by the Buddhas. Esoteric Buddhism is also known by various other names such as Vajrayana, Diamond Vehicle, or Mantrayana, Path of Mantras. This method is classified as definitive, ultimate truth, and is based on secret oral transmissions, forming the foundation of its practice. Esoteric Buddhism is divided into 2 major schools, Vajrayana and Mantrayana. The development of this practice is closely linked to numerous influential scholars and practitioners contributed to its growth, ultimately making Esoteric Buddhism a dominant religion in Tibet and spreading it to many other countries in Asia. 2. The origins and development of Esoteric Buddhism. Esoteric Buddhism developed between the late 5th and early 6th centuries in southern India, and during this period, it split into 2 main schools, Mantrayana and Vajrayana. The foundations of esoteric thought were formed during the early phases of Buddhism and were clearly reflected in the mantras found in Buddhist scriptures, such as the Peacock Sutra. After the second half of the 7th century, Hinduism began to explore and study Buddhist doctrines and theories. However, Mahayana Buddhism was limited by its focus on theoretical teachings and could only provide guidance on philosophical and ethical thought. As a result, Buddhism gradually distanced itself from the broader masses. At the same time, in India, there were increasing occurrences of mystical and metaphysical phenomena. To retain these powerful mystical aspects, Mahayana Buddhism began to integrate more closely with Hinduism and Brahmanism. Through perseverance and overcoming difficulties, Esoteric Buddhism managed to establish itself as an independent system within Mahayana Buddhism. The transmission of this method originated from the Buddha Vairocana, Mahavairakana, and was passed down to Vajrasattva. From there, Esoteric Buddhism spread to the north, reaching Tibet, China, and Japan, and further expanded into southern regions like Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. This led to the formation of 2 primary branches, Southern Esoteric Buddhism, Theravada Esotericism, and Northern Esoteric Buddhism, Vajrayana. 3. Esoteric Buddhism, perspectives in various countries. Esoteric Buddhism holds different perspectives and interpretations depending on the country in which it is practiced. These interpretations have shaped the development and influence of esoteric Buddhism around the world. Esoteric Buddhism has been transmitted and taught to disciples through oral transmission. This is one of the reasons why this school has not been widely disseminated, and only those with the right karmic conditions could learn about it. However, with the development of information technology today, esoteric Buddhism has spread to many different countries and has become more accessible. It is particularly prevalent in countries like China, Tibet, and Japan. Esoteric Buddhism in China. Esoteric Buddhism in China became known in the 8th century through the teachings of 3 famous Indian monks, Shubhakarsiha, Vajrabodhi, and Amoghavajra. When esoteric Buddhism developed in China, many Chinese monks recognized the significance of Buddhism during this period, and they began to teach a doctrine that integrated Zen, Pure Land Buddhism, and other Chinese schools of thought. This practice flourished during the Tang Dynasty. However, over time, esoteric Buddhism in China declined and eventually almost disappeared. Esoteric Buddhism in Tibet. Before esoteric Buddhism appeared in Tibet, there was no clear religious tradition there. The only indigenous practice was the Bun religion, where people primarily worshipped deities, wrathful spirits, and demons. Esoteric Buddhism was introduced to Tibet in the late 8th century when King Trisong Detsen invited 2 Indian masters, Shantarakshita and the great Guru Padmasambhava, to spread the teaching. Vajrayana Buddhism, together with Mahayana Buddhism, fused to form the spiritual foundation of Tibetan Buddhism. In Tibet, there are 4 major esoteric Buddhist schools: Nyingma, Kagyu, Sakya, and Jilug. Only after undergoing special initiation rituals and practicing under a qualified lama are disciples permitted to learn and practice esoteric Buddhism. Esoteric Buddhism in Japan. Esoteric Buddhism was introduced to Japan at the end of the 8th century and the beginning of the 9th century. Its arrival had a profound impact on Japanese Buddhist practices, and it continues to play a significant role in Japanese religious life. This practice, esoteric Buddhism, was transmitted by 2 great masters, the first being the Venerable Master Kukai, also known as the Patriarch of Japanese Esoteric Buddhism, Shingon, and the second being Master Saicho, who is considered the founder of Tendai Buddhism in Japan. Kukai traveled to China to study under the great Master Huiguo, and upon returning to Japan, founded the Shingon School. This school became increasingly prosperous and played a crucial role in Japanese Buddhism. Esoteric Buddhism in Vietnam. Esoteric Buddhism was introduced to Vietnam in the 6th century when an Indian monk named Vinny Taruchi arrived and translated the Mahayana Dharani Sutra, Phapon Temple. This sutra is closely associated with esoteric practices and linked with various Zen and esoteric traditions in Vietnam. Practice flourished during the Ding and early Lei dynasty. At Hualu, Ninh during the Din and Lei Daihan eras, Buddhist texts like the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani Sutra were carved into stone pillars, indicating the prevalence of esoteric Buddhism at the time. Since its establishment in Vietnam, temples have opened classes to teach Vietnamese monks about esoteric Buddhism. In 1936, Zen Master Nut Te became the first Vietnamese monk to receive the teachings of Tibetan lamas. This master had many opportunities to engage with esoteric practices in various countries, and since then, practice has grown more widespread in Vietnam. Who does esoteric Buddhism worship? Before fully understanding esoteric Buddhism, many people mistakenly believed that this school was heretical, thinking that it falsely claimed to represent the Buddha, but actually worshiped demons and malevolent deities. However, once practitioners received proper and detailed instruction in this practice, they realized that esoteric Buddhism is not heretical, but instead venerates the Buddhas, particularly those in the Vajrayana tradition. Common representations in Vajrayana Buddhism include the 5 Dhyani Buddhas, also known as the 5 Wisdom Buddhas, which include Vairocana, Akshobhya, Ratnasambhava, Amitabha, and Amoghasiddhi. Esoteric Buddhism also honors various bodhisattvas, such as Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin, Manjushri, Samantabhadra, Kshitigarbha, and the 1,000-armed Avalokiteshvara. Other deities include the Guru Padmasambhava, the 6-armed Mahahala, and Tara. The 8 great protectors in Tibetan esoteric Buddhism include Yama, the Lord of Death, Mahakala, the great black deity, Yantaka, the subjugator of death, Kubera, the god of wealth, Hayagriva, the horse-headed deity, and others, such as Brahma, the white deity, and Pesi, the god of war. Conditions and rituals for practicing esoteric Buddhism. Many Buddhists are now studying esoteric Buddhism and practicing this path, believing it to be one of the methods that offer exceptional benefits for overcoming obstacles in life. However, to practice esoteric Buddhism effectively and experience its sacred power, you must understand the following rituals and conditions for the path. Conditions for practicing esoteric Buddhism. Esoteric Buddhism is considered one of the most profound and sacred practices. If you intend to follow this path, you must possess a sincere and compassionate heart, with a deep understanding of impermanence and emptiness. Additionally, you should commit to a safe and positive method of taking refuge in the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, and maintain the most positive direction in your practice. Rituals for practicing esoteric Buddhism. The rituals of esoteric Buddhism are diverse and require solemnity and discipline. Monks must observe these practices strictly throughout their period of spiritual training. The rituals that are key to esoteric practice include: for higher-level esoteric practices, monks should prepare an isolated place, such as a cave, a sacred forest, or a remote temple. The duration of these retreats can range from 1 week to 3 years. The ascetic practitioners follow a strict schedule, which includes reciting the Great Compassion Mantra 108 times, the Mantra of Rebirth 1,180 times, and the Kundi Mantra to achieve spiritual efficacy. These practices are often combined with the use of a large wooden fish, mum, to maintain rhythm during chanting. The ascetic practitioners also ensure their meditation room is clean, spacious, and free from distraction. For lay practitioners, having a dedicated room for practice is essential, and they should not be burdened with family matters. A strong commitment to the practice is required. Offerings and ritual items. Esoteric practitioners often use offering items such as incense burners, flowers, and prayer flag. Chanting tools include the mandala, vajra, thunderbolt scepter, and bells. The vajra is a significant symbol in both Buddhism and Hinduism, particularly in Vajrayana esoteric Buddhism. It represents indestructibility and spiritual power. The vajra is symbolic of Buddha nature, which is unbreakable and eternal. Cross vajra is another ritual item, symbolizing psychological aspects of Buddhist practice. Its design reflects the unchanging nature of Buddha's wisdom, which remains unshakable and powerful, just like a diamond that cannot be cut or destroyed. The three-pronged vajra is crossed to form a cross shape, symbolizing the inherent wisdom and activity of the Buddhas, associated with the wheel of Dharma. In the practice of rituals, the four corners of the large altar often have small vajras placed, symbolizing the destruction of the 12 links of dependent origination. This sacred object is called the cross vajra, or vajra cross. The vajra bell is a musical instrument commonly used in esoteric Buddhist rituals and is considered indispensable. Each time the bell rings, it resonates throughout space, dispelling afflictions, evil spirits, and negative energies. The vajra bell is paired with the vajra scepter. The handle of the vajra bell is shaped like half of the vajra scepter, while the other half forms the body of the bell, which is relatively large. Together, these two parts combine to create the beautiful form of the Dharma realm bell. The vajra bell has three main components: the vajra peg, the handle, and the bell itself. These three parts represent the three realms: the desire realm, form realm, and the formless realm. Dear friends, we hope this information has helped you gain a clear understanding of this practice. With sincere chanting and dedication, it can bring you the best results and guide you toward a brighter future.